I still remember that electrifying moment, when under the glow of expensive chandeliers at my wife's boss's lavish party, she coolly introduced me as just a friend, erasing our bond in front of an influential crowd. In those first 100 heartbeats, the sting of humiliation and betrayal cut deep, and I felt every ounce of my self-worth questioned. That public snub, delivered with icy precision, set off a chain reaction I never expected. Little did I know, that night would be the turning point, a night after which her world would crumble, and mine would begin to rebuild with quiet, relentless determination. I had always believed that a marriage was a partnership, a union built on trust, respect, and shared identity. For years I had invested everything into our life, endless support, sacrifices in my career and personal pursuits, and a heart full of hope that together we could weather any storm. Yet that night, amid the clink of champagne glasses and the soft murmur of important conversations, she deliberately distanced herself. As she laughed with her boss and mingled effortlessly with the guests, I was left standing in the background, an unacknowledged presence. Her actions that evening weren't just a minor slip, they were a public repudiation of our union, a signal that she valued the impressions of others far more than the vows we once cherished. The shock left me reeling. I remember watching her from across the room, her eyes sparkling with confidence as she navigated the crowd, completely unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that I was her husband. Every whispered introduction and every casual dismissal of my presence felt like a blow. I felt betrayed, invisible, and utterly humiliated. It was as if the love and commitment I had poured into our marriage had been reduced to nothing more than a burden she could easily discard. That moment not only stung, it marked the beginning of a profound personal reckoning. In the days that followed, I wandered through our once shared home as if it were haunted by memories. Every corner echoed with moments of intimacy, laughter, and promises that now felt like distant dreams. I questioned my worth and wondered how I could have been so blind to the growing rift between us. I spent long nights in silent introspection, grappling with the pain of rejection and the crushing realization that the person I loved had publicly disavowed our bond. But amid that overwhelming sorrow, a spark of determination began to kindle. I resolved not to let her callous act define my future. Instead, I decided to use that betrayal as a catalyst for transformation, a stepping stone toward reclaiming my identity and rebuilding my life with strength and dignity. I threw myself into work as a way to cope, finding solace in the busy rhythm of my career. I took on extra projects, pushed the boundaries of my creativity, and sought to prove to myself that I was capable of greatness without needing someone else's validation. Late nights at the office, once filled with a dull resignation, became sessions of introspection and fierce determination. I immersed myself in every challenge, channeling my hurt into a drive to succeed. Every email sent, every project milestone achieved, was a small act of defiance against the humiliation of that night. Slowly, I began to rediscover the parts of me that had been overshadowed by our failing relationship. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who always believed in me even when I doubted myself. Their encouragement became a steady beacon, reminding me that I was more than the sum of my losses. I started pursuing hobbies I had long neglected, jogging in the early morning light, reading books that sparked my imagination, and even picking up the guitar. Each new pursuit filled me with a sense of renewal and independence that I hadn't felt in years. The journey of rebuilding wasn't easy, it was fraught with painful memories and moments of lingering self-doubt. There were days when the weight of her betrayal would return, a silent, oppressive force that threatened to pull me back into despair. But I learned to recognize these moments as part of my healing process, opportunities to remind myself that my value wasn't defined by her actions or by the shallow judgments of others. I started journaling every night, pouring my thoughts onto paper and slowly transforming the raw pain into insights about who I was and who I aspired to be. In those pages, I documented not just the sorrow, but the budding hope that I was building a new future, one that was rich with possibility, free from the ghosts of public humiliation. As time passed, the wound began to mend, replaced by a quiet confidence. I realized that I had grown through the fire of that night. I was no longer the man who stood silently in the corner of a party, invisible and ignored. I had reclaimed my identity and rediscovered my strength. Each step forward was a victory, a silent, personal revolution against the injustice of being dismissed so publicly. I began to see that the world didn't end with her callous disregard. It was only the beginning of a journey toward self-empowerment. This is where I leave off for now, at the precipice of a new chapter. In the next part of my story, I will detail how that night not only propelled me toward professional success but also led to a series of unforeseen events that reshaped my life entirely. I will share the triumphs and the lessons learned, the moments when I realized that true worth comes from within, and how I ultimately found the strength to redefine success on my own terms. My journey from humiliation to empowerment had only just begun, and I was determined to turn every painful memory into a stepping stone toward a future filled with hope, integrity, and unyielding self-respect. I still remember the day the repercussions of that humiliating night began to take shape. It started with whispered conversations and furtive glances in her workplace corridors, a place that had once been her stage for charm and ambition. In the weeks after that fateful party, I began to hear fragments of news that sent a chill down my spine. Her boss had quietly initiated an investigation into her conduct. At first, I tried to dismiss it, focusing on my own slow rebuilding, but soon the evidence became undeniable. Colleagues confided that her unprofessional behavior had been noticed by senior management. The same confidence she wore that night, so casually dismissing our marriage, was now being scrutinized. Little by little, the repercussions of her actions rippled outward, shaking the very foundation of her career. It began with a formal warning, a discreet memo delivered to her in private. I learned about it through a mutual friend who had always been close to both of us. The friend told me, "I'm really sorry, but you know how it goes. One misstep and they start questioning everything." I felt a pang of sorrow, not for myself this time, but for the woman I once loved. Even as bitterness churned in the recesses of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder if she had truly grasped the gravity of what she'd done. Her boss's party had been more than a social event. It had been a window into her priorities, and now those priorities were catching up with her. Over the next few weeks, as the office buzzed with hushed conversations about accountability and integrity, I noticed a shift in her demeanor during our occasional encounters. Once confident and vivacious, she now moved with a cautious timidity, her smiles forced and eyes downcast. I saw her avoiding long conversations with colleagues and hurrying out of meetings with a barely concealed anxiety. The news of her warning soon escalated. Within a month, I learned that she had been let go. It wasn't announced with fanfare, but rather as a quiet decision made behind closed doors. A decision that, in hindsight, seemed inevitable given the mounting concerns about her professionalism. I won't say I celebrated her downfall. There was no glee in my heart, only a sober reflection on the events that had led us both to this juncture. I had spent years giving everything I had to our marriage, believing in a partnership that, in the end, was unbalanced. The sting of being publicly dismissed at that lavish party had set me on a journey of self-discovery and reinvention. And now, as I watched her career crumble like the remnants of a once glittering facade, I couldn't help but feel that the scales of fate were finally tipping in my favor. Work became my sanctuary during this tumultuous period. I channeled all my energy into my projects, determined to build a future defined by my own merits and resilience. I dove headfirst into tasks that challenged my creativity and strategic thinking, often burning the midnight oil as I crafted proposals and refined ideas. In the quiet hum of the office, with the city's neon glow seeping through the windows, I discovered a newfound strength within myself. Every presentation I delivered, every milestone I reached felt like a personal triumph, a counterpoint to the pain that had once threatened to consume me. The support from colleagues and mentors, who had always seen potential in me even when I doubted it, became the fuel that propelled my ascent. They offered words of encouragement that were both genuine and uplifting, reminding me that my worth wasn't measured by the approval of one person. With every project success and every new client won over, I felt the wounds of that humiliating night slowly begin to heal. The laughter that had once echoed in a grand hall was now replaced by the respectful nods of business partners who recognized my skill and determination. Amid the whirlwind of professional reinvention, I found moments of unexpected introspection. Late at night, in the solitude of my apartment, I would reflect on the irony of it all. Here I was, piecing together a future out of the ruins of our failed marriage, while the woman who had once belittled our union now faced the stark reality of unemployment. I began to write, journaling my journey with unflinching honesty. Page after page, I recorded not only the successes that bolstered my confidence but also the lingering sting of betrayal and the complex emotions that came with it. In those written words, I found a catharsis that allowed me to reconcile my past with my burgeoning future. I realized that each painful memory was a lesson, each scar a testament to the resilience that now defined me. Socially, I started to rebuild connections that had been overshadowed by the weight of our shared history. I reconnected with old friends, those who had once silently supported me from afar, and forged new relationships with people who appreciated authenticity and strength. I began to attend events not as the sideline spouse but as an individual with a voice, a vision, and an unwavering commitment to my own growth. Each interaction, each shared smile, was a reminder that I was more than a footnote in someone else's narrative. I was the protagonist of my own story, and I was determined to write it in bold, uncompromising lines. Yet, even as I advanced in my career and nurtured new friendships, there were moments when I caught glimpses of her. A chance encounter in a coffee shop, a fleeting glance at a networking event, each time the past surged forward, unbidden and raw. I'd see the way her eyes flickered with regret, or the subtle slump of her shoulders as if carrying an invisible burden. Those moments, brief as they were, reinforced the reality that our lives had diverged irreversibly. She had sacrificed our bond for ambition and validation, and in doing so, had set her course on a path marked by isolation and professional downfall. One evening I attended a small industry mixer, a casual affair at a trendy downtown bar, where the air was thick with music, laughter, and the clatter of glasses. As I mingled, I couldn't help but notice that the subject of her dismissal was a frequent topic of hushed conversation. People spoke of her unprofessionalism and the ripple effects it had caused in her company. I listened silently, a quiet observer to the downfall of someone who had once shared my life, and felt an odd mixture of sorrow and vindication. It wasn't a moment of triumph, but rather a quiet affirmation that the consequences of our actions are inescapable. In that crowd of successful, self-assured individuals, I realized that I had emerged not as a victim, but as a person who had chosen to learn and grow from adversity. As the weeks turned to months, I continued to forge ahead, guided by the principles I had honed in the crucible of heartbreak. I maintained a strict focus on my goals, refusing to be sidetracked by the remnants of a past that no longer served me. Every day I reminded myself that my worth was intrinsic, a quiet strength built from the resolve to rise above humiliation and rebuild my life on my own terms. I celebrated each milestone with a quiet confidence, knowing that every achievement was a step further away from the shadows of that ill-fated party. I also began to give back. I volunteered my time mentoring young professionals who were just starting out in their careers, sharing with them the lessons I had learned from my own experiences. In these moments of mentorship, I found that my journey resonated with others who had faced similar betrayals and setbacks. Their eagerness to learn and grow reaffirmed my belief that resilience, when nurtured, could lead to extraordinary transformation. I realized that my story wasn't just about personal success. It was about inspiring others to see that even the most painful betrayals can be catalysts for remarkable change. In the quiet moments of solitude, late-night walks along empty streets, reflective evenings spent with a cup of coffee in hand, I came to understand that forgiveness was not about excusing the hurt that had been inflicted upon me. Rather, it was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment that threatened to hold me back. I learned to let go of the bitter memories not for her sake, but for my own peace of mind. Every step I took, every new achievement, was a declaration that I was no longer defined by the actions of someone who had once cast me aside. I had reclaimed my life, and I was determined to live it fully, without the weight of past betrayals dragging me down. Now, as I stand on the brink of new opportunities and gaze out at a horizon filled with promise, I can't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. The journey from that humiliating night to the resilient, confident person I am today has been long and arduous, yet every challenge and every setback has been a lesson in disguise. I've learned that true strength isn't measured by how others treat you, but by how you choose to rise after every fall. And while the echoes of that painful party may still occasionally surface in my thoughts, they no longer wield the power to define me. This chapter of my life, a testament to the unpredictable twists of fate, the sting of betrayal, and the quiet power of self-reinvention, has taught me that every ending is merely the beginning of a new story. A story where the heart, scarred yet unbroken, finds its rhythm in resilience and hope. I continue on this path with the firm belief that the choices I make today will shape the legacy I leave behind. A legacy built not on the failures of the past, but on the triumphs of a spirit determined to flourish in spite of them. I still remember that moment, the final, soul-shaking moment when I realized that the echoes of betrayal had finally given way to the steady cadence of my own triumph. Under the quiet glow of a winter sunrise, I stood before a mirror that reflected not the scars of humiliation but the gleam of hard-won resilience. I had journeyed from a night of public disgrace to a life where my worth was defined by my own choices, and now, with every breath, I embraced a future built on integrity, courage, and an unwavering belief in myself. Over the following months, my world continued to transform in ways that I had once only dared to imagine. The sting of that fateful party had gradually faded into a backdrop of distant memories, replaced by new opportunities and quiet victories that filled my days with purpose. I had built my own sanctuary, a life where the laughter of genuine friends, the satisfaction of creative work, and the relentless pursuit of self-improvement formed the foundation of who I was becoming. Each morning as I sipped coffee in my bright, modest apartment, I felt a renewed sense of freedom, knowing that I was the architect of my own destiny. My career, once a silent refuge from the pain of rejection, had now blossomed into a beacon of professional achievement. I was no longer content with merely surviving, I was thriving. I took on projects that challenged my intellect and creativity, and my ideas began to gain traction in ways that surpassed even my wildest dreams. Boardrooms and industry panels became stages where I spoke with quiet confidence about innovation, resilience, and the art of turning personal adversity into success. Every handshake, every nod of approval from colleagues, reaffirmed that my path was my own, a path paved with the determination to succeed regardless of the opinions of others. Outside of work, my personal life had also taken on a new, vibrant hue. I reconnected with friends who had always seen the spark in me, those who celebrated my unique vision and shared in my passion for life. We met for long dinners, spontaneous trips, and quiet evenings filled with deep conversations about everything from philosophy to our shared dreams. With each encounter, I felt a renewed sense of belonging, a feeling that I was finally surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could offer them. In these relationships, I discovered that the most fulfilling connections are built on mutual respect, honesty, and the courage to be vulnerable. In a surprising twist, I found solace and inspiration in creative pursuits. I dusted off an old guitar and began to play, letting music become an outlet for the turbulent emotions that once threatened to overwhelm me. I enrolled in a painting class, where each brushstroke allowed me to express the complexity of my journey, pain, hope, loss, and ultimately renewal. I even started a blog where I chronicled my experiences with raw honesty, sharing the lessons I'd learned along the way. The response was overwhelming. Strangers reached out to tell me that my words had given them the strength to face their own challenges. That outpouring of support filled me with a quiet joy, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, the act of sharing our truth can spark a ripple of healing across countless lives. As the seasons changed, so did my understanding of forgiveness. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the wrongs that had been done to me, it was about liberating myself from the chains of bitterness. In therapy sessions and quiet meditative walks, I learned to let go of the anger that had once threatened to consume me. I forgave my wife, not for her sake but for mine, so that I could move forward unencumbered by the weight of resentment. In forgiving, I discovered that the truest form of freedom comes from accepting that the past is unchangeable and that my future is mine to mold. This act of release was transformative. It allowed me to fully embrace the possibilities of tomorrow without being haunted by the ghosts of yesterday. One crisp spring afternoon, I found myself invited to speak at a local conference on personal resilience and leadership. As I stepped onto the stage in front of a crowd of eager faces, I felt a surge of energy. I shared my journey, not to boast, but to illustrate that even the most painful experiences can serve as stepping stones to greatness. I recounted the humiliation of that boss's party, the crushing despair that followed, and the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding my identity. I spoke about the nights of endless self-doubt, the days spent in solitary reflection, and the small, almost imperceptible victories that gradually restored my sense of worth. The audience listened intently, and as I concluded my talk, the applause was not just a tribute to my achievements, but a validation of the universal struggle to rise above betrayal and hardship. That day marked a pivotal moment in my personal evolution. It wasn't simply about professional success or the accolades that came with it, it was about realizing that I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. I had taken the raw pain of public humiliation and channeled it into a force that propelled me forward. I became an embodiment of the idea that our past does not dictate our future, our choices do. Every setback, every betrayal, had ultimately led me to this point of clarity and strength. In the midst of all this progress, life continued to unfold with its own quiet ironies. There were days when I would casually run into former acquaintances who had once witnessed that humiliating party, and their eyes would flicker with a mix of pity and disbelief as they observed the transformation in me. I no longer carried the sorrow of that night like a burden. Instead, I wore it as a badge of honor, a reminder that I had overcome something that could have easily broken me. And though I never sought retribution, I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the consequences of her actions had reverberated far beyond the confines of that single event. I had built a life of substance and meaning, a life that spoke to the power of self-reliance and inner strength. My journey wasn't a solitary one. Along the way, I encountered mentors and friends who had faced their own trials and emerged stronger. Their stories intertwined with mine, creating a tapestry of resilience that inspired me to keep pushing forward. I learned that true success isn't measured solely by financial gain or professional accolades, but by the depth of one's character and the courage to live authentically. Each conversation, every shared laugh over a cup of coffee, reinforced the idea that the most important validation comes from within, and that my worth was intrinsic, unshaken by the fleeting opinions of others. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my modest yet proudly decorated apartment, I gazed out at the city lights shimmering like distant stars. The night was quiet, the air cool and filled with promise. In that reflective moment, I allowed myself to truly savor the journey I had traveled. I remembered the bitter pain of that night when my wife's actions had cut me so deeply, and I marveled at how that very pain had catalyzed my transformation. I had turned a moment of public rejection into the foundation of a new life. A life where I was in control, where I defined my own success, and where I nurtured my own happiness without depending on anyone else's validation. At that moment, I made a silent vow to continue walking the path of self-discovery and growth, no matter what challenges lay ahead. I promised myself that I would never allow the scars of the past to dim the light of my future. Every day, I would strive to be a better version of myself, one who embraced change, who sought out new opportunities, and who never lost sight of the strength that had carried me this far. My journey was a living testament to the idea that true empowerment comes from within, from the willingness to learn, to forgive, and to move forward with an open heart. In the final analysis, I realized that the events of that fateful night, the cold dismissal at the boss's party, the subsequent fallout that led to her job loss, and the emotional turmoil that followed, were not the end of my story but the catalyst for my rebirth. They taught me that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can always control our response. I chose to transform pain into purpose, humiliation into hope, and betrayal into the fuel for my own ascent. Today, I stand as a man who has reclaimed his identity, who has redefined his worth, and who continues to build a future that is as bright and boundless as the dreams I once dared to imagine. This is the conclusion of my journey, a story that began with heartbreak and public humiliation, and ended with quiet triumph and enduring self-respect. I have learned that every setback is a setup for a comeback, and that the measure of a person's strength is not in how they fall, but in how they rise. I now live a life where my achievements are not shadowed by the failures of the past, but illuminated by the resilience that I have cultivated through every trial. My journey has been long, sometimes painful, but ultimately, it has been profoundly liberating. As I look to the future, I do so with unwavering confidence and a heart full of gratitude. I know that challenges will come, and that life will always present its own set of obstacles, but I am ready to meet them head-on with the strength and determination that has defined my path so far. I have discovered that true empowerment lies in owning your story, in turning every painful memory into a stepping stone toward a better tomorrow. And while the echoes of that long-ago humiliation may still occasionally whisper in my mind, they no longer have the power to hold me back. This is my story, a journey from public rejection to personal reinvention, from heartbreak to the quiet, steadfast joy of self-empowerment. I stand as a testament to the idea that no matter how cruel the circumstances, one can always choose to rise, to rebuild, and to thrive. My life, now rich with experiences, successes, and the wisdom gleaned from every challenge, is a living narrative of resilience, innovation, and the unyielding belief that I am enough. And as I continue to write new chapters in this incredible journey, I do so with the conviction that every ending is merely the beginning of something extraordinary.